Getting to the heart of the matter. Back to Guy, Ben, and Frank with more Inside the News.
Welcome back to the program Inside the News. Glad to have you with us all across the country, and as Rush Limbaugh used to say, across the fruited plain. And we want to welcome all of our radio affiliates, AUN TV, and you watching on YouTube. Frank Vernuccio, Ben Brunson, myself, Guy Wehman. Okay, Ben, let's get started. And as we were talking about off the air, there were three different subject matters that we were going to be talking about in this segment. And one is China. And it's like China again. And you had a great response to that, Ben. Go.
Well, China is going to dominate the discussion in this country for the balance of this century, the way the Soviet Union dominated discussion for the second half of the last century. And we are going to face this growing behemoth that is gaining in economic power every day. And one of the things that longtime listeners know from hearing my voice is that economic power is what ultimately translates into military power. In 1940, the US had a military that was, at the start of the year, virtually non-existent and puny compared to, let's say, the German or Japanese military machines of the day. And yet everyone on the planet knew that if the US entered the war in Europe, it would be decisive eventually. And that was because of the economic power of the United States. And once that economic power is pointed in one direction towards all-out war, it is decisive. And it was decisive in World War II. China has that growing impact now, along with the United States, the ability to have the economy that can support a massive war if they got into one. And of course, they have 1 billion plus people to also fuel that type of scenario. So they are a very formidable foe, unlike, in my opinion, the Soviet Union, which never had the real economic engine to support any type of long-lasting war. They had a big standing military during the Cold War. They had nuclear weapons, but China is the future opposition we face. And again, Trump has helped redefine that and elevate that reality into the minds of Americans. And that's pervaded even in Washington, even among Democrats. So at least we recognize the challenge we face, and we're going to continue to discuss it and face this challenge for the rest of this century, at least.
Frank, going back in history, 100 years, 200 years, maybe 1,000 years or so, China always had this vision that they were the great country on the planet. And now they actually can visualize that. And with Xi at the helm here, they're actually going to try and realize their potential and their place in the world of what they envisioned years and years. And I mean, you know what I'm talking about, Frank.
Yeah, indeed. Of course, China has one Achilles heel, which, of course, their economy is dependent on exports, particularly to the United States. It is an historically fascinating situation that America's greatest enemy depends for its economic survival at this point on the American people. And I would also add on American corporate genius. Much of the advanced weaponry that China has produced has been manufactured and developed by American corporations. So it is kind of fascinating, but it is also clear that the United States has it within its power to cut off China's economic progress to a significant extent. President Trump was doing that bit by bit. He didn't want to go cold turkey into this because there would have been supply lines, supply chains that would have been cut off commercially, retail in the United States. I think his ultimate goal was to get other countries, whether it's Vietnam or Mexico or any place else, to start producing the cheap shirts and cheap stuff that was coming from China. Unfortunately, his ability to do so was cut short by losing the 2020 election, but that was the ultimate goal. Whether the United States wises up and starts taking domestic actions to try to get supply lines elsewhere other than China, and therefore limit China's ability to produce all those dollars to produce a military machine, remains to be seen.
All right, starvation in North Korea, and Frank had originally brought up this topic here, but due to COVID, Ben, this is a real possibility, isn't it?
Well, it's a long-standing issue, and I would say it's not due to COVID. It's due to a communist centrally planned system, and it is the result that you see wherever you had central planning imposed on an economy, whether it was the Soviet Union, the Maoist China, Cambodia, or currently Venezuela. When you impose central planning and you destroy the market pricing, the free market mechanism, and price discovery, the ability of goods and services to find a price level based on the demands of individuals, you destroy that economy. And North Korea has this central planning system that modeled on the old Stalinist view of the world, and it doesn't work very well for them. So the only productive activities that exist in North Korea are government activities to steal money, basically. So they counterfeit money. They're engaged in a lot of these cyber attacks that happen around the world. A lot of these ransomware attacks emanate from North Korea. And so extortion and military spending and the sale of some weapons or the export of military know-how and advice, these are the only productive activities in North Korea. It is the perfect example of everything wrong with central planning and what goes wrong over time.
Okay, Frank, your take on this.
Well, North Korea boxed itself into a real corner. They were stating publicly that there is no COVID in North Korea. Somehow it had become a COVID-free area. Of course, it was pure nonsense. One of the ways they enforced that illusion was to kick out a lot of foreign representatives and reject certain foreign assistance. So UN Special Rapporteur Thomas Quintana had the ability to get into North Korea, and he found that the starvation prevalent already in North Korea because of their economic system has become far worse. Indeed, there is massive starvation at a scale not seen before, even in North Korea. And how the country gets out of it, God knows, but they're certainly, in a way, taking care of the issue themselves by simply losing vast parts of their population to starvation, who will then, of course, require no further food.
All right, we've got to get out of here because we've got a break coming up, but we're going to be back, and oh my goodness, we're going to be back about the attempts to overthrow an election right here in Iowa. We'll be back.
You're listening to Wehman, Brunson, and Vernuccio, Inside the News. Here's Guy, Ben, and Frank.
Welcome back to the program, Inside the News. Glad to have you with us. Radio affiliates across the country, we thank all of you. And out there in Portland, Oregon, we thank you as well. Ben Brunson, Frank Vernuccio, myself, Guy Wehman. Let's get into it right away. Iowa, the state of Iowa had an election. It was certified, already done, in the can. And now they want to overthrow it. I mean, I'm talking about the Dems in Washington, D.C. And they're saying, well, wait a minute, we want the Democrat to be on top, and we think we can do it because we have an army of Vindemans ready to go. Frank, go.
Well, it's a naked exercise of raw power by Nancy Pelosi. She is terrified that their razor slim margin of control in the House is going to become even slimmer and perhaps be lost entirely in the next set of legislative elections. She is trying to do everything possible to get as many Democrat incumbents seated as she can. Of course, in this one, she kind of miscalculated. The time to have challenged this was quite some time ago, right after the election, or right before, rather, the election was certified. She's now boxed in. The election was certified. It's official. I don't think there's a precedent for doing it at this point in time. She missed her opportunity, but considering the fact that the press is totally in the tank for the Democrats, she figures she can at least attempt it without getting too much bad publicity for what is essentially a coup over the people in that congressional district.
You know, her brazenness, Ben, just is mind-boggling. She will stop at nothing on her evil quest, and that's what I'm going to call it, an evil quest to dominate the United States political scene and to win elections for years and years to come if they build in these safeguards. And, oh, we'll steal this one here. We stole the presidential election. Yeah, I did say that on the air. And so because you can't look at all of these House and Senate races, and even in the states where Republicans won huge majorities, and yet you put, go Ben.
Well, we talk about Democratic hypocrisy a lot on this show because it's so common and there's so many examples. And this is another breathtaking example of the hypocrisy and the type of naked political power and lawlessness you can engage in when there is no press holding you accountable. So when you have the entire press corps, say Fox News, in your back pocket, and that press talking to your base and covering for you and not reporting on the things that you're doing that are quite questionable. This is the 2nd district in Iowa. Marionette Miller Meeks is the winner of that race. That race had 2 recounts and involved a bipartisan commission reviewing the count, and the GOP candidate won by 6 votes. It's been certified. It's done. It's happened. Congress took a vote several weeks ago to say officially that they accept all certified races that occurred back on November 4th of last year. And of course, that was in the atmosphere in which Trump was challenging the certain races. Now Congress is looking at, and it is possible that they could try to overthrow by congressional action the results of that Iowa race. Again, duly certified race. It's in the books, 2 recounts. So it's a legitimate win by the GOP, but it hasn't stopped the Democrats from doing what they accuse the Republicans of doing and trying to steal an election. And Frank hit the nail on the head. This is all about getting every possible seat you can into Democrat hands in anticipation of trying to fight off what's going to come in about 18 months now, when I think, and a lot of people realize, there'll probably be a big GOP wave that takes the House back for the Republican Party.
Frank, continuing on that same vein, we're starting to see it around the country that the GOP governors, that they're doing quite well in COVID. They've opened up their states and all, that the underlings within some of the administration, they're starting to make attacks. For example, down here in Florida, Nikki Fried with the agriculture secretary, she's a Democrat amongst all the Republicans. She's attacking Ron DeSantis because that's her only way to attack, is like, well, the rollout of the vaccine wasn't right, or the school thing was not right. And so she's trying to make digs. This is happening in other states across the country. They're trying to make digs to try and diminish those GOP senators or governors, but yet it's not going to work because the American people can see through it, Frank.
Well, the Democrat solutions clearly haven't worked. They haven't worked with COVID. They're not working at the border. And I dare say they're not going to be working in foreign affairs either. We talked a bit before about China. Just as the Biden administration, on one hand, is talking about the clear and present danger from China, yet it's been said by White House insiders that the Biden administration is going to be asking for a 10% cut in the defense budget. So clearly, in just about every area, foreign and domestic, the Biden administration, just a few months old, is already flailing. And it's flailing in such a way that even the biased media can't hide it.
You know, there's an overwhelming push to get the kids back in school here, Ben, and we're starting to see it's working. And many people are saying the science is bearing it out. You don't have to be 6 feet away now. 3 feet away is fine, as long as you maybe wear a mask or whatever. But these kids are not contracting COVID like the seniors are. And so that's our future. The herd immunity is through these kids, Ben.
Well, so much so that the science was known 9 months ago, 10 months ago. In fact,
Right.
Most of Europe, hardly a bastion of right-wing conservatism, but most of Europe kept their public school system open through most of this pandemic, because the science was so crystal clear that kids are not affected by this COVID-19 outbreak. They can suffer it. They're largely often asymptomatic carriers, but they build their own antibodies. And so a lot of those numbers aren't even included in the numbers I went through in the first segment to show how far we've come in terms of building up immunity in this country. At least 100 million Americans at this point have real immunity to this thing, and that number is growing every day. Kids should lead the way. This has been insanity. This has been the teachers' unions ruling the Democratic Party as they have for a long time, and exercising that clout to go on an extended vacation at the taxpayer's expense. This is really harming America. The children of this country, so many, we're in danger of having a lost generation from an educational perspective, where you have kids out of school for such an extended period of time. And this cannot stand much longer. The few states that have their schools still closed have got to open up. And this is, I think, a bipartisan issue when it comes to the demand to get back to normalcy and get our schools open.
That was Mr. Ben Brunson. He's the author of the Falstaff, Enigma, and Esther, Sling. You can find Ben's books at benbrunson.com and amazon.com. We have Frank Vernuccio. He's with the American Analysis of News and Media and the Minute Report for America. You can find more about Frank at usagovpolicy.com. You can find more about us at our website at itnradio.com, which stands for ITN is Inside the News, itnradio.com. And we want to thank our AUN TV network partners and Rick Trader and all of our radio affiliates across the country. We thank you. We're going to be back to pick up the pieces.
You're listening to Wehman, Brunson, and Vernuccio, Inside the News.